All right. It looks like we are live. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me. Let some people file into the chat. What's up, Count Zero? Leanne? Ogier, nice to see you all here. Thank you for joining me. My name is Jason Levine, Principal Worldwide Evangelist for Adobe. And for the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to be talking about how to mix 5.1 surround in both Premiere Pro and Adobe Audition CC. Excellent, hey. And I'll be talking to you, first we're going to start in Premiere and show you sort of the process. And this is meant to be for beginners if you've never done this before. If you have done it, perhaps some of it will be review. If you do it all the time, you can probably watch something else. No. But I hope you stay here. And I'm going to go through the process of creating a multi-channel sequence, talk about a lot of little preferences and settings that ultimately improve the surround mixing experience. A lot of the defaults are there as defaults. It's just really a way to get started, but maybe they're not the most ideal for when you're actually mixing in a surround environment. So I'm going to go through all of that stuff on the Premiere side first, and then we'll bounce over to Audition, sending the sequence that we're working on in Premiere to kind of show you how it's a little bit more elegant in Audition, a little bit easier, and you just largely, the real differentiator is that you just have a lot more screen real estate to work with when you're modifying multi-channel mixing on the Audition side of things. But you still will have all the capabilities from Premiere because we'll be dynamically streaming the video from Premiere into Audition's timeline. So very cool stuff using Dynamic Link there. Hello, Armand. Great to see you. Oh, from Kazakhstan. Hello. Okay, so let's get to it. Go ahead and switch over my screen here to a familiar project that I pulled up a few times. Oh, excellent. Hey, Marianne. Hi. So I've shown this. I don't mix too much in 5.1 these days, but this was the last one that I did where I actually did a proper 5.1 mix for this project that I worked on with my colleague Michael Shez, using entirely Adobe stock content, video content, and then I did all the sound design in Audition. So we'll get to this in just a second, but let's start from the beginning to talk about how do we begin or create a sequence that has the right 5.1 settings. So I'm going to hop over to my project panel here, and at the bottom right, as always, we have our new item icon. Click on that, and we're just going to choose sequence. Now I'm going through this kind of the long way to really show you how to build your own preset that you can ultimately recall later, to be used later on. Now, all the content here that I'm working with happens to be 1080p, 24, and or 30 as I'm taking a look here. So in this case, I'll just choose this DSLR 1080p 24 preset on the video side. And it tells you right away that the default here is stereo. So that's one of the fundamental things that you're going to want to change. So where do you change that? Well, you're not going to go to settings here. This is going to have, again, all of your video settings. The only thing that's significant in settings here is the actual sample rate. Now, again, all the audio that I'll be working with is 48K. That is the video standard. If you're coming off of a session, an audio session, where a lot of the ADR or just other sound design was perhaps done at 96K, here's where you set the sample rate for that entire sequence. And that's significant. By default, it's going to be 48. Most of the content you will probably likely work with will be 48K. But it's under tracks at the top here where you actually get to choose and denote that this sequence has a multi-channel 5.1 master, meaning that it understands and conforms to standard left front, right front, LFE, center, left surround, right surround. So where do you do that? So let's go over to audio here, and under master, you'll see if I click down that you've got 4 different options. The default, of course, being stereo. Now you'll see you have 5.1, multi-channel, and then mono. So first question I get a lot is, well, what's the difference from 5.1 and multi-channel? Does that just mean more, 7.1, 10.2, 12.4, whatever? Okay, so the basic comment here is that Premiere only allows for 5.1 surround mixing. In other words, a proper 5.1, which is, the standard, 7.1 is also standard today, but if you're talking about surround sound, something that will encode ultimately to Dolby Digital, whether it's Dolby Digital Traditional, Dolby Digital Plus, hey, Cossack, you're going to want to choose 5.1. Now, where you would use something like multi-channel is if you're creating a project or a sequence or ultimately delivering content, which is not uncommon, particularly in broadcast today, where you might need 8 channels. For instance, a lot of your cameras today capture, 4 channels of stereo, or they'll capture 8 channels of stereo or 8 channels of mono. This is where you set that. This is not the same as 5.1 surround mixing. In fact, when you choose multi-channel, you will not have a surround panner. So that's the key differentiator. So when we're talking about 5.1 surround, you want to choose 5.1 for your master. Now, as far as the track types are concerned, you can choose standard or adaptive. Now, if you're working with already pre-mixed, interleaved 5.1 content, now this is something that you can create out of Audition. You can create these files out of Pro Tools, out of Nuendo, wherever. This is basically where the sound designer hands you one, typically PCM WAV file. It's one file that contains all 6 channels, already mixed, already mastered, already done. You could, in fact, choose a 5.1 track for one of your audio tracks, or just choose adaptive. Or if you drag it into a new track, it can conform to those settings. It's entirely up to you. Generally, again, if you're starting from scratch, you're probably not already working with interleaved audio. So very seldom do I choose that, again, with the exception of when I've already done the music outside, or the audio and all the remixing outside, and I'm just kind of finishing, perhaps doing a final grade or something on the Premiere side. I've already got my audio, I drop it into a 5.1 track, and we're good to go. You can't modify that, you can't remix it. We'd have to go back to the master multitrack to do that. All right? Yeah, no background music here because I want you guys to pay attention. Would you like background music? I could turn it on. Hey, Brazil, Harnok, great to see you. All right. So we're just going to leave all of these at standard, okay? You can choose whichever types of individual audio tracks you want. And again, if you think you're going to be working with different, mono, stereo, 5.1, my recommendation would be go with adaptive because it does just that. It'll adapt to whatever you're working with. Okay. So we're going to call this 1080p24 surround, all right? You can see that at the bottom here. I'll zoom in for you. So I've just created a preset with this name so that I can call it back later. Hey, Simon. You're not late to the party at all. We just getting started here. And we're just going through the fundamentals of creating the 5.1 sequence as opposed to a multi-channel sequence, okay? So let's click OK on that, all right? And now we've got our blank sequence. Now, just to show you, because I'll, of course, bounce over to the one that I've already made, when you do that and you go into the audio track mixer, and by the way, you'll see in 3 places. First of all, down at the bottom of the sequence, you're going to see under where the master would be, the master audio track. It's telling you this is 5.1. That's good. All right. Oh, and hello from Germany. Hello. Hey, Kathleen Illustrated. What's up? You will also have along the right-hand side here, this is your multi-channel meter. Now, my UI is a bit dark. I don't know if that's coming through on the stream, but you can see you've clearly got 6 separate level meters, 6 channels that you'll be monitoring. And then on each of the audio channels in the mixer, you will be greeted with this surround panner. So this is how you know. Yeah, I know. We've got to turn those Nightbots off count. I know it's referencing stuff from last week. This is letting you know that this is a multi-channel. I'm reusing the terms. This is a 5.1 surround session. Each of your tracks can have a surround panner. You can control their movement in 5.1 space, and we're good to go. All right? So that's creating it from scratch. Now, if I just bounce over to the sequence that I already made, again, this is using footage. This is the actual edit of the short trailer that I did called Something's Happening. And here, if I just make this full screen for a second, I know my camera's in the way, but this kind of gives you an idea of all the various audio tracks that we're dealing with here. And what you're actually seeing down below, and in fact, all of these are named in the mixer. You're not seeing the track headers named as such, because I generally don't do a lot of mixing there. But these are all of the individual stems that I recorded and created directly inside of Adobe Audition. Can I find Adobe tutorials in the Polish language? Kozak, you may. One of my colleagues, Piotr, he used to actually work on our evangelist team. Now he's on the development side. He might be able to tell you. Certainly, you might be able to translate some of these. And I believe you'll be able to turn on just default English captions, if that helps at all. But Polish training, I'm not exactly certain. But for sure. Oh, in fact, my friend Bart as well, who's a Premiere editor and fantastic man. He probably has quite a few tutorials. He's based in Warsaw. Ping me afterwards, and I'll see if I can find some stuff for you. Okay, so here we are inside of Premiere. We've got our surround session. It just looks good. It looks ready to go. But before you start, there's a couple more preferences. I know, super boring, but this is for beginners, and I want to show you, set these things ahead of time to make that experience better. Things related to sort of automating the mix, working with keyframes in a surround mix, and also just setting up your listening environment. Let's not forget that if you're going to be mixing in surround, now I'm not going to say, whoops, system preferences. I'm not going to say this is an absolute must, although it kind of is. But if you're going to be mixing in surround, you kind of have to have 6 speakers, which also means that you have to have a sound device that supports, at a minimum, 6 channels of output. Yes, you can do it blind. You don't. I mean, I've done it myself. Okay, I'm just going to guess what's in the rears in terms of watching level meters, and I can sort of balance the center and the sub based on, again, sort of average RMS loudness. That's not the way to do it. That may sound obvious, but keep that in mind. Now, they don't have to be high-end pro studio speakers either, necessarily, particularly if you're not going to be mastering that 5.1 mix. But you have to have 6 speakers, and really, you got to have 5 speakers and a subwoofer. Thank you, Felix. So that way you can hear what you're doing, all right? Now, where you set that up, of course, is under Preferences, Audio Hardware. So here, once again, we can see the sample rate of the session. We're working in 48K. Oh, whoops. Sorry, I got a little overzealous with my zoom right there. And I happen to be using a Focusrite Thunderbolt Claret device, which has 18 ins and 20 outputs. So no shortage of outputs here. But the key is that this is where you define, again, those standards. You can see by default, it has already assigned the first 6 outputs of my device, this being front left, front right, center, and you can see the little pucks that are sort of residing in sort of each one of those little holding areas there. The bass clef here representing LFE. I'll be honest, I don't love that icon. I think that's a mistake. It is bass, but it shouldn't be a bass clef. Left surround, right surround. Okay? So this is telling you that these speakers, these channels are ready to go, and we have that capability with this device. There's a lot of very inexpensive USB multi-channel audio devices today. Focusrite makes them, M-Audio makes them, formerly Digidesign, PreSonus, Lexicon, quite a few options. Not cheap, probably sub 200 US. But if you want to be doing surround, that's the investment you have to make. And then, as I said, with speakers, I generally don't recommend things like computer speakers, but I would say having 6 discrete speakers is better than just trying to fake it with stereo, okay? So that's where you're going to set your output. Now, there's 2 other fundamental things that I'm going to talk about here before we actually get to the mixing. And I won't have to recover these in Audition because it's the same. But they're both based around what happens when you start automating and working with a mix. So the first thing at the top here is called Auto Match. Now, I'll come back to this. I just want to point out where this is. So again, this is Preferences Audio. And the auto match time is basically when you're in an automation mode. So let's say we're playing back audio and you're moving what we call the puck here in our surround panner in real time. Hey, Tom, and you want it to, you've already done a pass where you've already done a bunch of automation, but you're just going to tweak a couple of little movements. Well, you will always start in write mode. When you stop working in write mode, by default, Premiere and Audition will switch to touch mode. And touch mode allows you to make little momentary corrections just by, via a touch, right? Touching the panner, touching the LFE level or the center channel level. And then when you're done, the nature of touch mode is it goes back to the last default state from your previous write automation pass. Does that make sense? That sounds like something a college professor would say where everyone in the class gets very silent. Let me say that again. So in write mode, you do all of your automation. I missed one little thing that I want to change. So it goes into touch mode. I touch the fader or touch whatever it is, I make a change, and then after I make that change, the automation itself reverts back to whatever I did originally moving forward, okay? The time from when you let go, right? You make your change and you let go to the time which it returns to that original state, is the auto match time. Wow, that's difficult to explain. Did that make sense? Nightbot says, if you enjoy this music, okay. So, all right. So that's auto match time. And again, we'll come back to that in a moment. The other thing that I want to point out is that just like with automating or animating motion, where we're used to keyframes and keyframing, when you do audio automation, the default actually for the minimum time, meaning, again, for every X number of milliseconds, it's going to automatically create keyframes of whatever it is that you're modifying, whether it's volume, whether it's panning left to right or in the rear or surround channels. There is a time duration, a minimum time where it's going to allow Premiere to draw those keyframes. Now, I believe the default minimum time, it's either 200 or 250. And to be honest, that's pretty good. I've dropped mine to around 150. What I believe is not enabled by default is this: minimum time interval thinning, linear keyframe thinning. What that means is that, again, for every movement that you make, hey, ArtMamCraft, for every movement that you make, it's drawing keyframes. So if you have this minimum time set to like 10 milliseconds, okay, that means that for every 100th of a second, it's going to be drawing keyframes. Now, that might sound great. You might think, no, that's what I want. I want that level of detail. You absolutely do not. Because, again, you could do one fader move, which would ultimately leave you with thousands of keyframes. You don't want that. So the minimum time should be, I usually say, 1/10 to 1/5 of a second, 100 or 200 milliseconds. And you want to make sure that it does this keyframe thinning. And basically what it does is if it sees a lot of things kind of along the same plane, instead of displaying 50 of them, maybe it displays 5, okay? It just makes it easier to modify afterwards. So you'll want to make sure that both of those boxes are checked and that your minimum time is somewhere between 150 to 250 milliseconds. Now, if you make it too long, right, let's say you made it 1,000 milliseconds, so 1 second, well, you could do a whole bunch of moves and it won't drop. I mean, it won't create keyframes for you, right? So this is why you don't want to set that too high, but you don't want to set it too low because then there's too many keyframes to deal with. You're really going to have to find the sweet spot. But I'm telling you, 150, 200, 250, that's kind of where you want to be. And I'd probably say 150 for most things. A lot of stuff can happen in 1/4 of a second. So 250 is usually a little bit too long. All right, done. Enough. 17 minutes of setting stuff. Let's actually mix something now. Okay. So here's now the process of multi-channel mixing in Premiere. So let's start. I believe I've got all kinds of ambient sounds going on here. And if you look down at the bottom, I'll zoom in for you. You can see there's actual ambience, which is just sort of wind and rustling. There's storm, so rainstorm. There's lightning. There's lightning sound effects. This is just like additional lightning crashes and things. So maybe we'll start with something like this. So storm is on track 23. All right. So let's move ahead, and it's playing throughout almost the entire piece, which is why I'm choosing that. So let's just take a quick listen to this, just from the start, to kind of give us an idea of what this sounds like. And currently, everything is in mono, all right? Okay? And if we wind back, and you can see that the storm is on the whole time. Let me go ahead and play this. I'm just going to turn up my volume so I can hear it a little bit better, too. Okay, now that's all self-contained on that one track, all right? So, again, am I going to be moving this around a lot? Well, maybe you are. Maybe you want to kind of have the storm start in the front and maybe move slightly to the rear speakers. Maybe you kind of want it to kind of keep moving. And if you add some delay-based effects like reverb or something, it's just going to make that rainstorm sound even more wet. See what I did there? So we can do whatever we want. So let's do that. Let's actually automate so that it's sort of moving more to the front and a little bit to the back, almost kind of pulsating. There's also, you'll notice there's this doom, 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 kick drum pulsating throughout the whole thing. So it could be a kind of neat almost nauseating, very C-like effect of having the rain kind of go from front to rear very subtly, right? Too much, it'll really make you kind of uneasy. But we can do whatever we want here. So I'm going to simply wind this back. And up at the top inside of our mixer here, under our automation modes, by the way, the default, of course, is read. Let's go into write mode. And then when we start playing back, we're just going to hit the space bar, click play. Anything that we do inside of this track panner, on this fader, on either one of these knobs, anything that we do, it's going to capture it. It's going to capture the motion, the automation of what it is that we're doing in real time. All right? Now, again, this is YouTube stereo broadcast here. You're not going to hear anything going into the rear channels, but you can see what's going to the rear channels here on this master fader or down here on this master fader. In fact, maybe I'll make this one a little bit bigger so you can kind of see it better, okay? All right, so now we don't have to solo this, but just so I can hear it a little bit better, I'm going to do that right now. So let me just first solo and let's give it a shot. Here we go. Okay. And just as I said, when I'm done with my automation, by the way, I just hit the space bar to stop. Notice what mode it goes to. Touch. Okay. So if we wind back, and I like using the rain here because I can talk over it without it kind of getting in the way. Let's go ahead and start playing back. I'm going to zoom in for you. All right. So again, no hands, and you can see that the little orb, the little puck, is moving. So all of the movements that I just made, if you're looking right here, you're watching it, right? You're watching it automate now in the exact position and movement that I just created. Okay? Now, as I mentioned before, let's wind back a little bit. Let me zoom back out for you here. All right, I think I went a little too far down there. So here's where touch and that auto match come into play. Let's go back into play. I'm just going to start playing back again. And I'm going to grab the panner. And I'm going to hold it here. And then I'm just going to very subtly go back down. I'm going to drag it back up, and I'm going to let go. And did you see how the orb, maybe you didn't, because it's so, the resolution's so high. When I let go, the orb hung there for like, you know, just a moment, and then over a period of 500 milliseconds, it started to go back down, but then the automation previously had it going back up. So you kind of saw it bounce a little bit. That's that auto match time, all right? When you let go of making a change, it's the duration from when you let go to going back to the last recorded automation state, okay? So very essential. And again, that's where you may find in a fast, like this is a slow horror trailer, right? It's slower. It's not, there's not fast cuts. You can hear the pulse is, let's put the kick drum back in there. All right, here we go. Take a listen again. Right? It's very slow. So the auto match time can be a little slower. It can be a half a second to let things go back into their native previous recorded state. It's probably going to flow a little bit better. But if I'm doing a, you know, I just saw Logan this weekend. If I'm doing Logan where it's, you know, and you got all this motion, that auto match time, it's got to be 10 milliseconds, right? You make a quick change, you want it to revert back super fast, or maybe you don't. You get the idea. So that's where having a shorter auto match makes a lot of sense, okay? Now, that's ultimately, friends, that's kind of the process of automating surround. Now, a lot of people ask me, there's also latch mode. What is latch mode? So latch is it's sort of what I would call write plus. Write denotes that you're creating automation for the first time. Touch is what allows you to go back in and make little corrections to what you've already written. Latch is a little more destructive. Think, again, it's like write. The difference is that it will stay wherever you leave whatever parameter it is that you're moving, and it'll ignore what was ever recorded previously, right? So let's say, like right now, I probably only have automation for another 30 seconds. If I go into latch mode and I just leave that where it is, it just overwrites everything that was there. It doesn't go back to anything. It just stays in the current state that I'm in. So again, it's just sort of like a slightly more advanced, aggressive write mode. As I said, really the difference is that write denotes first time pass. Now, having said that too, if you go into write mode, it'll just overwrite everything that you've done, okay? But write and touch are probably the two that you're going to use most of the time. Now, when you're done automating, and as I mentioned too, this goes for everything on the channel strip, so including the fader, and I'll let go, watch. And did you see the fader bounce back up there? Did you see that happen when I let go of it? That was the auto match, half a second. All of that stuff now continues to be automated. There's the fader move I just made. Okay, back up again. If I want to no longer write anymore, in other words, I'm done, the automation here is good, I like it, you can simply go into read mode. And now even if I drop this all the way down, wherever I start playback, it goes right back in. It's just reading the automation. So it doesn't matter what you do in the UI here, it's just going to read what's already been written to the track. Now, there's also, if you right-click from within inside the track panner here, you'll have this safe during write mode option too. So that's kind of nice so that you don't accidentally, you may still be in a write mode, but you don't accidentally overwrite something that you don't want. Again, the key is write for your first pass, touch for corrections, read for basically when you're done. So what's off? Off simply states that whatever automation you've done, this track is not going to respect any of that. In other words, it doesn't erase it, it's still all there, but it's not going to be a focus, it's not going to play back any of the automation that you wrote or created, all right? So a lot of times I'll go into off mode if I'm just trying to like listen to something like the rain, because maybe when it's automated and it's got effects and it's in surround, there was like a rumble or there was some EQ thing that I wanted to do. I don't want it moving. Like I need to EQ it. I need to do something very quickly. I don't want to write any EQ automation. I can put it into off mode, throw an EQ on there. Okay, that sounds right. Then go back into read mode. The EQ stays, no changes, no problem, and it'll read all the existing channel fader and surround automation. All right, makes sense? Very cool. Nice. Can I bounce it again? Sure. Let's keep moving here. Where was I? Storm. So let's go back into touch. All right. So it just moved by itself. Let's bring it up, and now I'm gonna let go. Let go. And it went back down. Okay. That's it. Real simple. Okay. So we can do this for any number of our tracks here. And again, we can use our meters to show us exactly what's going. Oh, also, it's probably worth pointing out, let me just go to something like the kick drums here. So this is all the way on track 6. Let's play this back. Let's go into write mode with this. Now for this, we probably want those kick drums to be going into the LFE, right? Our low frequency effects, our sub channel. So notice as I'm doing that now, raising this, do you see the sub level down there? Do you see? This is no sub. It's going to be the 4th from the left, right? And as I add sub frequency in there, now you see the level represented there, okay? Similarly, if I wanted to add some of that kick drum into the center channel, I'm going to use this one up here. Now you can see the one next to it, right? The 3rd one from the left. Now the center is getting some of that kick drum as well, okay? So that's where you control center and sub on the Premiere side, the levels of center and sub to your master, okay? Automation process is the same. All right. So how do we now modify the keyframes? Because that's what we were talking about in the beginning, right? That linear key point interval thinning and all that stuff. All right. So let's go back to the, well, actually here, we can start here with the kick drum. And I might need to change my UI a little bit, although I think we'll be all right. This looks okay. All right, now, one thing, if you are not already seeing, if you don't already have your audio keyframes enabled, and additionally, you want to make sure that under your audio headers, which, hold on, I'll zoom in because you can't see it there. We have these options to customize. Oh, you can't see it. It's right at the bottom. I can't zoom down anymore. It's right here, just under video header. Customize audio header. You want to make sure that you have the show keyframe. You can't see that either. You have the show keyframe button enabled in your track headers, because this is going to allow you to access all of the recorded keyframe information that you just did. So when you click on this, you'll see that you have the clip keyframes can be shown, the track keyframes for volume and mute, and then the track panner. So this one, we just did some keyframe movement on the center and the LFE. So if I turn on LFE, all right, here you can see there's the motion. And by the way, notice it's not like, if we hadn't thinned out those keyframes, there could be 30 keyframes just ascending right here. And why would we need that, right? So that linear keyframe thinning, hold on, sorry, get it very warm in here. It's getting hot in here. Let's take off all our jackets. It just used 2 keyframes, okay? And then again, in this linear move right here, yes, it's ascending in amplitude. And you can see it'll tell you. So this was minus 7.33. This one was minus 6.94. So not even a half a dB increase. If we had that time set to, 50 milliseconds without that linear thinning, you'd have 70 keyframes there. Not helpful, right? So now you see why I really emphasize that linear keyframe thinning option and that time duration, 150 to 250 milliseconds. Now here, it used a lot more. I was going a bit more slowly. And of course, you can delete these, but you can see that already, if I want to really make something dramatic here, it's a pain. There's too many keyframes to move. So again, you got to find the sweet spot depending on what you're doing. But that's how you reveal them, okay? It's easy for me to say. It's contained on the Show Keyframe button here. Track Panner, let's see the center keyframes, and there they are, okay? So this is as we were increasing the amplitude to the center channel, right? And I just did like a little ramp for those 4 or 5 kick drums right there, all right? And you can edit these keyframes just as you edit every other type of keyframe on Audio and Premiere Pro, very simply, all right? Cool. Yes, that's right, Francis. No, the stream itself is in stereo, so you won't get to hear it. Yes, very cool. All right, so that is 5.1 mixing in Premiere. It's actually quite easy, and we make it pretty comfortable to just really start working. If you've got 6 speakers to monitor through, this is a really fun workflow. But it actually gets a little bit better, and it gets better if you use Audition. And I'll tell you, yeah, so the automatic decimation, so that's it, Count Zero. The setting, that's what that auto thinning does, right? So that's by having these checked, particularly this linear keyframe thinning, that's what it's doing automatically, all right? So again, if I wanted fewer keyframes at this point, I'd raise this to something like 200, okay? And then it'll thin it further. You can see you can set sort of what it denotes as sort of a larger volume adjustment and such. But these are the boxes that you want checked, and this is the time that affects how many keyframes are generated in that period of movement. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to bounce all of this over to Audition, and I'm going to get to show you how you do this in Audition and how this is really where I do it. I just think it's a nicer experience. All right. Similarly, by the way, just to show you, because we were doing different keyframes on different parameters, let's go ahead and show the keyframes here, Track Panner. So we did some front and rear movements, all right, on the storm, remember our rainstorm, and there it is. And this, again, I was doing sort of slower, gradual moves. That's legit. I mean, I'd still, again, I think the time, 150, was a little too, it was too fast. So I'd probably, 200 milliseconds, so it would be even better. We'll have less. But you can see overall it did a really good job. And this is where that linear thinning has some intelligence, right? It could have easily have done in fact, it probably did. And then after the fact, it thinned those out, okay? Pretty cool. All right. So how do we get this over to Audition, and how do we begin mixing surround in Audition? You find it easier to render the video and put it into Pro Tools. Well, yes. So here I'm going to show you not rendering the video, which there's no time lost to you, and doing this in Audition. And if you've done it in Pro Tools, it's not very different, actually. And you get a lot more screen real estate, and it stays unrendered, live, and you can publish directly to Media Encoder or to your favorite social channels from Media Encoder directly from other Auditions. You can actually finish it over there without even having to go back to Premiere. And all the while, the video, whatever it is, Red footage, Arri footage, DSLR footage, GoPro footage, Sony footage, all stays live. So if we go up to the sequence menu, the edit menu, and go edit in Adobe Audition sequence, that's what I was thinking. I knew sequence was in there somewhere. It pulls up this dialog. So here we've got the name, and we'll call this something happening, surround YT live, okay. Selection, we're going to send the entire sequence. Video, send through dynamic link. So here's what I was just talking about. We're not going to render it. Premiere will send it non-destructively to Audition. If we have any clip effects, we can render them if we choose. I'm not going to render them because I'm doing all the mixing over there. If we have clip volume keyframe metadata, it will send that over non-destructively. That stuff I usually preserve because a lot of times I'm doing just a little bit of sort of ramping in and out of various track volumes. So that's very useful. And then we want it to open in Audition, and you also have the option here for audio handles. So I'm simply going to click OK on this. It prepares the sequence for us. It prepares the audio for us. Yeah, count 0. Unfortunately, it's not a. It won't change by enabling it after the fact. You'd have to overwrite what you did or manually thin them. Yeah. So once it's enabled, it'll do the thinning, but it doesn't do it after the fact. That's a great feature request, though. Okay. Okay. This might sound silly. What happens if I spliced a pig sound with an anteater sound? Can you make it sound scary? Well, I would recommend going to my YouTube channel, which I happen to have queued up right here in the chat, where you can find more on surround mixing and sound design. And I actually talk about some of the sounds that I used here. Like there's this scene with the fly. Here, let me just bounce back over to Premiere. It's just be easier for a second. This little fly scene right here. So this was actually, this was a combination of some compressed air sounds and a balloon sound effect. You know, sound design is an art form, and I did it for a number of years, and you just got to get really creative. You know, the craziest things can be used to create sound. So like you said, splicing a pig with an anteater kind of seems sort of similar animals there, but you know, you can you can get very, very creative very, very quickly. Привет. So, okay, so here we are in Audition. Here's the video panel. Notice we've got the video streaming through from Premiere via dynamic link up at the top. Again, now I've got the same, you've got fractional playback options in Audition. So I've currently got that set to 1/8 res because there's color grading, there's After Effects, dynamically linked text, animations, and things. So that's really just for reference. You can, you can make it higher if you want. Just for my laptop here, if I want the best performance, that's where I'm going to be. So here we are in Audition. Now, as I mentioned, a couple of things that are significant. First of all, when you send it over from Premiere, it's going to take all of the names and all of the associated pieces and send them over here with all of the proper attributes, okay? And if we go to each one of our tracks here, you can actually see that they too will have their track panners. Now, I was talking a lot about real estate, so you might be thinking to yourself, whoa, that's even smaller, dude. What's wrong with you? Well, I'll get to that in just a second. There's nothing wrong with me. It's just, that's just a visual representation. Where you actually do the surround is much better. Now, before we even get there, let me just show you very quickly creating a surround from scratch in Audition 2 if you wanted to do that. Again, we just sent it over from Premiere, so it already knows this is multi-channel. File, new, multitrack session up at the top here, okay? Choose this, and really it's very simple. And all we would basically do is, give it a name, Untitled 1. Tell it where you want it to go. Now we've got some templates in here, and you can even see we've got surround stems for music, surround stems for video. So these templates are legit, and if you choose one of those, they'll automatically label things for you. You can see this is in 48K, 24-bit, 5.1. Let's just make it. I'll call it, here, I'll just place it on the desktop for right now. Just for giggles, okay? Click OK on that. And that just kind of sets things up for you. You can see left front, right front, center. This, it's sort of strange because, again, you're not usually going to put media into a track called left front and automatically have it panned that way. This is sort of, when we were talking about those interleaved files earlier, if you had all the stems already broken out and you're wanting to remix or master from the stems, you might use this template. I don't generally. Typically what you're just going to do is make a new multi-track session. Again, there are no track limits, so that's why you don't see number of tracks here. You're going to work in 32-bit float. You can work in 24 or 16. All right, the default is 32-bit float. And then your master just needs to be 5.1. And this is what you'll end up with. So, how do we access the track panner? Well, you can double-click on the icon right here. It's a little hard to see via the contrast on the stream right now. What's up? It's Joey. All right. Or you can see that under the window menu, you actually have the track panner contained in the window menu, which I also happen to have already docked off to the side here. So if I simply were to double click here, let's go to something where there's kind of a lot of audio here. All right, let's go to these lightning ones. All right. If I double click on this, here's your track panner. So this is what I'm talking about. And you know what I'm going to do, just so you can see this even better? Let me just change my, I'll lighten the UI. Where is that? Oh, it's under general, right? Where's the Adobe Gray? A little bit lighter. Sienna Blues. That's better. Okay. And let's go ahead and stick the track panner over here. All right. So I'll make the level meters a little smaller. That's what I'm talking about. Okay. So that is a nice, big, very, very present surround panner. And if you want, again, I might even take the level meters, stick them down there so I can have more track real estate, but still have a nice, comfortable environment to do my surrounding. So just as before, I'm just going to resize the track here. Notice in Audition, you have your automation lane, what we call this, and you can twirl that down. And then you have the same standard modes, read, write, latch, touch. So let's again go into write mode. And let's say we want to start with this lightning sound effect. So I can solo this first. All right, notice it goes right into touch. And now what I can do, you can kind of see where it is right now. And it's only playing into the front, left, and right. So let's say I want to start in the front, left, and right. And as it dissipates, I want it to kind of go to the rear. So let's go ahead and do that. And the other one will start in the rear and have it come back up to the front. And do the opposite again. Okay? So now, as we play that back, and notice, remember the auto match time after this last one that we did? Auto match kicks in, and it goes back to that default view, okay? So again, very easy. The difference now is that you've got all this screen real estate, and this just looks so much cooler. But also, all kidding aside, it just gives you a better indication of how much audio is going to each channel. By the way, you can also see that you can discreetly lock a sound into a specific speaker, basically, if you wanted to. Now, what is uniquely different about Audition's surround mixing environment is this button right here. You don't have this in Premiere. You don't have a discrete only send to LFE. This is pretty significant because a lot of times I don't want something bleeding anywhere else but in the LFE. For instance, those, I'm trying to think. I don't have, this particular one. I've got some sound in here, some like ambient, which is just some weird. In fact, here, let's see if I can find it visually. I know the shot I'm looking for. I just can't remember. what scene it's in. I think we may have passed it already. Okay, it's not important. There's just a lot of times where you often want to send something discretely to the LFE. And when you do that, you'll see that it actually disables all of the other channels visually. It illuminates the LFE button. And now you can control how much from 0 to 100 is actually being sent to the LFE. So if that were the case, let's choose something like this storm here. We'll add this back in. All right, let's say I want the storm to be LFE only. All right. And let's go into write mode on this. All right. All right, now again, we've got some of that other stuff. Some of it's going to the LFE. But notice the storm by itself, it's always populating that LFE channel. There's always something going there, controlled by this slider. All right. And as I move back and forth, all the automation that we just did, we're seeing it. And yes, the something happening De Niro, that's it. One of Michael's finest moments on camera, I believe. Okay, so that's creating the automation. I don't need to show you latching or writing or the other stuff. It's the exact same. The real difference is you've got discrete LFE only. You've got a little bit more precision just in terms of the, like, again, dealing with angle and stereo spread. Okay, these are the kind of granular controls. Let me zoom in so you can see those better, and how they're affecting the... Here, I'm just trying to get this perfect for you here. All right, I might have to cut off surround at the top, but center, but you get the idea. So the stereo spread, right, in degrees. I mean, this is just, it's very specific. The angle, this is where you want to be. And I can't remember who it was who was saying about doing it in Pro Tools. Again, you've got that same kind of control. And there's quite a few surfaces out there. We support Yukon, Mackie, and several Bluetooth iPad apps where you can do the same motion externally if you feel more comfortable without kind of clicking and dragging the mouse. Now, having said that, of course, you can also draw and or paint your automation just as we did in Premiere. And this is once again where I just like it better in Audition simply because you have more real estate. So if we go to the lightning channels over here, and we have our automation lane twirled down, show envelopes, now you'll see we can show simultaneously, by the way, envelopes for all of the parameters that we've modified. And here we modified the pan angle and the pan radius. So if I go ahead and turn on pan radius, there it is, okay? And now, once again, you can see all of the keyframes. I can expand this. This is no different really from Premiere. All right, we can play this and you can see exactly what it's doing and you can modify those keyframes. And as I'm modifying them, you're seeing that it's, again, reconfiguring the panner. Now, just like before, let's go into our preferences real quickly. Where were those? There's the auto match again. It's under multitrack, I think. Yeah. Okay, so I've got the auto match to 1 second. Minimal time interval thinning. Minimum time, let's do like 250. This is pretty good, but it's even probably a little bit too many, okay? So if I were to wind back, again, we're in touch mode. Let's just modify that first one, okay? The very first one. Here we go. Let go. Okay? Can you already see if we just do like a side-by-side right here? So this was before this little section right here. All right, and you can just see it's not so much. I mean, we only raised it by 50 milliseconds, but there are less keyframes after we made that time a little bit longer, okay? So that's it. And if we went to 300 milliseconds, you'd probably see 2 or 3 less keyframes. By the way, with Audition, you can just pull them right off the canvas, just drag all the way down, and those keyframes go away. So that's really nice. You don't have to right-click and delete. You can just click, drag it off the canvas, and they go away and they disappear. Okay? You wanted Bubblecano on your Nokia? That can be arranged. That too will be released later this year on Spotify. I'm putting together a compilation of show themes and things that I've written over the years. So that'll be available soon enough. You'll be able to do that. I'll make you a ringtone if you want, Simon. Just ask me for it. All right? Okay. All right, so lastly, this is 49 minutes in already. This is automating, this is mixing surround. It's very simple. And as I showed you before, anything else in the mixer that you do when you're in these automation modes, all of that gets automated too. Again, if we wanted to make sure that we don't mess up any of the automation, go into read mode. If we want to verify something, but we don't want to hear all of the panning and chaos that we did, we go into off mode. Okay? But all the automation remains. You're not destroying anything that you've already done. Okay, so let's talk about the export process. Now, as I mentioned, because this is being streamed in from Premiere via Dynamic Link, we can theoretically finish it here in Audition. So we've got a couple options. We can either say File Export back to Premiere Pro, all right? And when we do that, we've got options for creating, stems, or again, creating an interleaved multi-channel singular file that's going to contain all of those tracks mixed down into their respective 5.1 positions, or stereo, or mono, or stems. Or the newer way, which we introduced about half a year ago now, is to export with Adobe Media Encoder. And when we choose Media Encoder, this is no different now than going through to Premiere. Okay, same exact thing. This is the Media Encoder. So let's say that we wanted to, let's say we were authoring a Blu-ray, all right? For those who still author Blu-ray, or whatever, it doesn't really matter. You have the options here of changing your various settings, okay? And you'll see, there's no presets in this particular one. Let's go into something like, again, one of our MXF ones. You're going to see all of the same presets and things that you've created, and for these, we just have to find one of our multi-channel presets. Let me show you on the Premiere side how you access the same thing, but with kind of the menus that you're a bit more familiar with. So let's go ahead and select this, do Command-M or File, Export Media. All right, so here maybe we'll go to something like, again, maybe we'll go to a Blu-ray, or maybe you're going to go to a GoPro Cineform or a ProRes 444 master or some kind of MXF master, all right? All the video stuff we're not concerned with for this. We want to get to the surround pieces of that. So if we go over to Audio, under Dolby Digital, now what you'll see is that you have various options here, okay? So you can say Blu-ray compliant audio stream, all right? And you can set all of your various channel configurations here, okay? Your bitstream mode here. Dolby Digital Surround EX mode, you can choose that. EX is kind of that old school thing that you used to see on receivers, HD receivers and things like that. I guess it's probably still around. Here, let's see if we can go into GoPro Cineform. Oh, now, does this one not let us change the codec? Oh, maybe that one doesn't. Here, let me try, let's go into ProRes. See if we can do that there. Yeah, okay. So again, in ProRes, you're going to have all of your Apple options. You're not going to have your Dolby option there. Also worth pointing out, almost forgot, yes, of course, is that you can export directly to Dolby Digital from Audition. So here we are back in Audition. So this is if you're just wanting to make an AC3, which is the classic Dolby Digital, or EC3, which is Dolby Digital Plus. You can also mix down directly from here. This is a very common workflow. This is kind of that, do it in Pro Tools, send it back to Premiere or FCP or wherever. This would be that workflow where you choose your format. Okay, so in this case, we're going to choose Dolby Digital. You can see it showing up in the menu there. Okay, and then if we go into our settings, here's where you now have, again, Dolby Digital Plus, or if we were doing this for Blu-ray. Now, the big difference with Dolby Digital Plus is that you've just got a simply higher data rate. So you'll see it goes all the way down to 1024 kilobits versus classic AC3, I think it's 640. Yeah. All right. So unless it's required of you, I would go to DDP, choose your channel configuration, enable LFE, your data rate. I typically go to the highest one. This is where you can do things like dialogue normalization for all of your center channel information, any pre-processing. These are all standards part of the Dolby Digital export. Your downmix metadata. So again, you go to a playout arena where they don't have a 5.1. You actually already have the downmix for Dolby. That's part of the spec built into the metadata so that it automatically folds in the surrounds, the LFE, and the center. So even if you're watching in stereo, you still hear everything. You're not going to hear it around you. You'll hear it in a stereo downmix. That is all in there. The bitstream info, dynamic range control. And these are like standards for film and music and speech. And again, just some additional, this is like the AD converter type. I don't typically ever change it to standard HD-CD. Nobody really does that anymore. If you're publishing Dolby DDP HD-CDs, though, here's where you set that, okay? All right, peak mix level, and then again, room type, etc. All right, and this can be exported directly, and you'll actually see that it's going to create a proper EC3 file. So this is if you wanted to keep things entirely separate, send it back over through to Premiere, or send it to somebody else, right? Do your surround mixing here, send this file, give this file to someone else, or to publish it through your DVD authoring software, whether it's Encore or anything else, all right? So, my friends, that is it. That is surround mixing, all right? It loads the CPU automation. So the automation load is very minimal, if that's what you're asking. Again, what you're seeing here, because I've got this streamed in from Premiere, this video, and there's no proxies used here on this particular one. So there's a lot of grading. You can see it's graded. There's live text templates. So there's live After Effects comps unrendered. I'm not even running After Effects. You can see that. It's not running. So all of that's being streamed. And so if you saw it was a little sluggish at a point or two here, that's why. But no, the automation itself is very light on CPU. It's a pretty efficient process. All right, everyone. Well, that is all the time I have. I thank you so much for joining me for this last hour, practically 56 minutes here on the Adobe Creative Cloud YouTube channel. Again, my name is Jason Levine. If you want to learn more, please, you can check out my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/ here, I'm going to write it in the chat so you can see it. Jason Levine video. All right. Also, be sure to follow me at BeetleJace on Twitter for more information and to find out when these things are happening. We always do YouTube live streams Mondays and Fridays at 1 p.m. Pacific time. And you can find me tomorrow on the Premiere Pro Facebook page unveiling a new thing that we're doing. You may have seen something called Make the Cut. If you Google it right now, Adobe Premiere Make the Cut, you'll see what I'm talking about. Very cool news that we're announcing tomorrow. If you're an editor, if you do music video, if you do 5.1, you're going to want to check out this live stream. That's tomorrow, 1 p.m. Pacific time on the Premiere Pro Facebook page. Big stuff's happening and very cool opportunities to possibly win some cool stuff. All right. Thanks again, everyone, for joining me. Hope to see you again next time. Spasibo. Yeah, you're so welcome. Thank you. Thank you. And we will see you again right here on the Creative Cloud YouTube channel. Take care, everybody. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.